What was your early life like?
My early
Like,
life?
tell me the story about that Christmas tree again.
Oh,
I want. What happened? You
well, we had a Christmas tree with candles on it, lit.
lit candles. They were real
Yes.
candles, not lights like we
No,
have today.
No lights. And my brother was very adventurous and always into everything. And he was kind of like Tootie.
Tootie the bird.
Yes. But anyway, he was reaching for some candy, which
Uh-huh.
was also on the tree. And pulled the tree down and the whole thing was burning. And we had quite an exciting time. But we lived through it.
But you say it started a fire. The tree.
Yes.
The tree lit up because of
Indeed
those.
it did.
Because those were candles and not lights.
That's right.
And what year do you think that was about?
Well, must have been awfully early. Of course, my brother was 2 years younger than I. I suppose it was around in the teens.
In the teens. All right. Where we are now, we're in the teens.
100 years ago. More than 100 years ago.
So when she talks about the teens, she's not talking about when she was 13. She's talking about the real teens.
No.
That's right.
19 teens.
Well, one of the
That's right.
problems with Mother, when they look up her birth date and it's 10, they have to figure
Oh,
out
that's-
it's not 2010.
You're the reason I had to put 1954 all the time instead of 20. They always want the year, the full year instead of just 54.
That's right.
You have to put
You used to
1954.
like to watch him
That's
shave
right. That's
when
right.
you were a
What's
little
this
girl.
about your grandfather?
Well, my grandfather was very cute, and I used to watch him shave. I remember his what do you call those things? Suspenders
Yeah.
hanging down below his belt and so forth, and he was shaving, and he'd asked me to sing, and he asked me to sing Silent Night, because I'd learned from my nurse, I'd learned how to sing it in German, so this was 1914. And so I said, well, Granddaddy, they do not sing that song anymore in that language, but I'll sing it for you.
Well, 19. That's when the war was.
Yeah.
So that was going to be one of my questions. If you remember World War One,
Yes, I do.
and
I remember the Lusitania.
you
Going
the
down.
Lusitania.
Yes,
So
I
you were just a real little. That was in 1917,
15,
1915.
yeah,
So you were 5.
yeah.
And what are your or memories of the Lusitania? Did your
Oh, I remember that it was a big boat that had gone down with a lot of people.
1,200 people or something killed?
Oh, my, yes.
And were a lot of family members were angry?
No family members.
But I mean, as
thank
far
God.
as in your house,
No,
were
thank
family
God.
members angry at the Germans at that point?
Oh, yes. Well, that was the whole idea, was to disturb the people so that we could go to war, because the president had to get them mad at the Germans.
Yeah, was Wilson, was he didn't want to get into the war at
No.
first. He wanted to stay out of the
He
war,
wanted to
but
stay
the
out of the war.
Lusitania, was that something
Yes,
that,
that was the thing that they definitely set that up,
yeah.
so that they would get us in it.
So, then you do you have any memories of the Roaring '20s? I mean, you were only,
Oh, yes.
you were
Indeed,
10.
I do. Roll down stockings with elastic bands holding them up, and and then it was terrible to show your waistline. That was
Oh.
just a very vulgar thing to do.
Couldn't show the waistline,
No,
the
you
bare
had
midriff.
these dresses that went straight down and hugged your fanny. They were ugly beyond words.
Yeah.
But that's what we thought was great.
Uh
And they were up to the knees and so forth,
huh.
very, very low. And oh my. And the rumble seats coming along, and later on in the cars, and all that, I remember that.
Do you remember you don't go back to a wagon, do you? You always had
No.
cars?
Well, no, I remember sleighs. I remember
Oh.
a lady that came to, it was a terrible snowstorm, and she was nurse coming to see my mother or something, and she fell, her sleigh and horse, they went around the corner and fell into the ditch. I remember that.
Wow. Well, yeah, you would remember that. And were you? Do you remember when that was? Or
Well, must have been pretty early.
pretty early? You were
I
really
was not 10. I was in my
okay.
first 10 years.
Wow. But was that the in the wintertime? Was that
In
the,
wintertime.
is that mainly how they got around in the wintertime rather
Well,
than
that
rely on
was when the snowstorms were really bad. That's how they did it.
kind of like they had up in the Northeast
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
year?
Well, this was New Jersey.
Yeah. Okay.
And
So you're
they-
from New Jersey. You're a
Yes.
Jersey girl. Okay.
Yes, that was.
And what town was that?
Well, I went there when I was 3, and I stayed until I was, I think, 50.
Loved it that much? 47 years.
1950. 1950.
Oh,
Not you were
1950.
50.
19.
Okay.
1950.
So well, that's
And it was the town of Short Hills.
Short Hills.
Short
Okay.
Hills. And Short Hills was, you couldn't find your way around Short Hills. There wasn't a 20 street of straight road, 20 feet of straight road.
It's all winding.
All winding.
Yeah.
And the fellow that developed it was connected with the shades that you pull down on your windows. And he was a millionaire, and he looked like Uncle Sam. He had a long beard, and he went around in a Model T car
Uh-huh.
and planned this Short Hills so that there wouldn't be more than 20 feet of straight road. And so
The-
you couldn't find your way. You could find your way all across the country and then get lost in Short Hills.
and then, unless you had a map of the city, which did they have those
It
available?
wasn't a city. It was a
Or
lovely,
town.
It was
Yeah.
a bedroom community.
And-
And everybody, that we had the Lackawanna Railroad that went right through, and everybody commuted to New York.
It was all railroad.
Yes.
And Short Hills is what would be the another city by there?
Well, Melbourne was on one side, and Summit was on
Okay.
the other, and that's where we went to stores. There were no stores in Short Hill.
Let me ask you a couple of questions that some of my friends on Facebook want to know. How would you like people to remember you? About things that you would like people to remember about you?
Well, I'd like to them to remember that I contributed something to.
Uh-huh. That's nice.
That's what worries me about being old. You don't contribute anything.
But she did contribute.
Yeah.
What I did.
What were some of your activities over your life that you've done with the
Well-
junior service?
Well,
league?
when I got back from college, I did a lot of work in Short Hills. We did theatricals, raising money for charity, and we
You had-
we really did work for things.
Mhm.
We had a thrift shop. I remember going down there to that thrift shop and taking care of it. And I remember the people that came in and talked to us, and it was very interesting.
Well, then
I wish
you
I.
taught ballroom dancing at one time?
Oh well, I
Wow.
was asked. You know, in those days, we didn't work. Girls didn't work.
Mhm.
And I had one friend that had a job. That was terrible. But I was offered a job by a lady who ran a dance place. And I was her assistant. And she wanted to train me to take over. But my father wouldn't let me do it. He said, no, you wouldn't want to do that. And I regret it terribly.
I see.
He said, what did he say the reason was?
Oh my, I hate to admit it. He said, now suppose we wanted to go to Bermuda or somewhere and you wouldn't be able to go. Oh, I'm so humiliated when I say that.
And this was your father that said
My
that.
father was a great fellow. He was either way up or way down. He was either very wealthy or he was in trouble all the time.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so
And
we
tell-
had a very erratic kind of a thing. But he was a wonderful fellow too, and he invented what they call smokeless coal during the World War I. and he was the government would not allow him to draft because they wanted him to continue this in order to save the ships from having any smoke coming out of the. You see, that was a sort of a hint to the U-boats,
Oh, yeah. Wow,
and
yeah.
so they used his smokeless coal, and they could get away from the U-boats. One of the nicest things I ever had to do was give lectures in the planetarium, where you go in complete dark and these children come in to listen to you, and you trace the year with the stars and point out all the different stars and so forth, and give the story of how Christ was probably born in the spring, not Christmas at all, but spring, because that's when the shepherds were out with their sheep. The sheep were being born, and they had to be there. So all the signs point to the fact that the Star of Bethlehem came at that time, and there is historic proof that there was a big star that came by at that time.
And it was made up of several stars that were seen together.
Yes, that's right.
That's an interesting variation of that one.
Yeah.
What do you think your best moment in life was? Do you have one?
I had an awful lot of them. I've been lucky all my life, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the luckiest things I ever had was Jenny,
Mm-hmm.
my daughter.
Yeah.
Well, she was an accident.
You hear it here first, folks.
I was just
Look at
an
that.
accident.
She's a beautiful accident. I'm an accident. Were you an accident? Maybe you were too. Who knows?
I was, sure. Yes.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, well, Jenny, of course, is, I mean, besides being a great friend and
Oh
a
my.
big help to you right
Yes,
now.
she is. And I think I've been of help to her too.
Yes, she has, and over the years, I hired Mother as a person who did my grading for me. Many
You grade okay?
years. She, not the grading so much, but the correcting of papers. And she was wonderful, and then she came in at the beginning of every year. I would repaint my cabinets and things to give them a fresh look, and Mother was a great painter.
I love to
She
paint.
loved
Yeah?
to paint.
Yes, I did.
And she even came in and did some lectures in the classroom
Uh-huh.
on flowers,
I was
wildflowers.
crazy about wildflowers.
Yes,
Wildflowers is my real love.
I know that, that's where you and I came in with the
Yeah.
video, with the
Yes.
slides,
Yes.
when you came down here in '66, was it?
Yeah,
And the garden club,
Yes.
and
yeah.
and you had the girls over a couple of
Yeah.
years
That's
ago
right.
in
They
November.
all came over and heard her wildflower talk, and she did it all beautifully.
She did it from memory? Did she have
Most
notes?
of it from memory,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, so you're coming up on your 105th birthday. Is there anything in particular you'd like to do on that day? Let's say you could do anything.
If I could do anything,
Yeah.
I don't know. I just take things easy. Don't worry about much. No use in doing it.
As far as you're concerned, you're okay. You don't really need to do anything else.
Well, I do need to, but I don't. I haven't got the pep to do it. I keep up with the paper. I
Uh-huh.
want to know what's going on. I have great opinions about it, and I want to see things turn out all right. I
Yeah.
went all through the Depression, you know, and
Yeah.
we had just awful things then,
So
and
you,
we got over it.
and you were in your 20s,
Yeah, I was.
Really?
Yes.
okay? And
About
you,
20s and
at that
30s.
point, had you gotten to New Jersey yet?
Oh yes.
Okay, so the Depression, even in the suburb of New York City, still
Oh.
had your problems, or were your dad doing okay with the coal?
Well, No.
He was working with
took a
something
trip-
else then.
We took a trip out west and we were sitting in the beautiful mountain area there on our way home when we were in the swimming pool and so forth. And my father got a telegram and it said, come home immediately. You've lost $450,000 in one day. And we made it home very quickly. That was the end of that.
So
That
this was
was the-
1929.
that was the crash.
That was the crash.
1929.
Whoa. What was his mood on the way home?
We just went home.
Was he in a daze?
Well, yes, of course we
Yep.
were. And we didn't even realize then what would happen. But it would.
And you were 19 years old then, and
Yes.
you remember, of course, you're a young adult at that
Yeah.
point. So you remember pretty much what was
Yes,
going
I do.
on.
Indeed, I do.
Had you, when you first heard the news, did you have any comprehension of what that really meant?
Well, really, I didn't.
Yeah.
I did not, but I found out about it all right, and it was an awful thing. And seeing all those men selling apples in New York when they were out of jobs, it was a terrible, terrible time.
Tell him, now, was it during the war that World War II, and Daddy was away and you got stopped by a policeman? Why don't you tell that story?
Oh no, that was after I was married.
Yeah.
That was after I was
And when did you
married.
get married? What year?
I got married in 1935.
Right in the middle of the depression
Yes.
was right. It's still going
Yes.
on pretty
Yes.
heavily.
Yes, I did. And my husband was off. He was in the at that time he was in the Air Force, and he was home only one night a month. But we still had a little apartment, and we still had a little car, and there was a thing on the street where you put a penny in, and you could, or a nickel or whatever, and you could park for 5 minutes. And one time I put the nickel or the dime or whatever and rushed to the bank, but I didn't get back in time, and there was a policeman. And oh, I cried and I said, please don't take me in. I only have $7.50 to feed myself and my daughter, and I can't afford to give up. And he was nice enough to let me go. And then later on, when
Well, what did he tell you?
he said, oh, the policeman said, what did you eat? What do you eat? And I said, for breakfast we had so and so and so and so. For lunch we had this. For dinner we had this. Well, I'm going to go home and tell my wife. My ancestor
Right, we're talking
was-
about Roger Williams that
was
came
a
over.
member of he was a member of the, he was solicited to be a member of the group that came with,
The Pilgrims.
well, not the Pilgrims, but he came after the
Puritans?
Pilgrims came in 1620.
This was a colony.
The Pilgrims came in 1620, and he came in 1636.
Mm-hmm.
And he tried to join that group, but he didn't like the way they were acting towards the Indians, and so didn't like the way they were in the colony. So he got himself in trouble, and the whole group, including my ancestor, had to leave in the middle of the night.
Wow.
Yes, sir. And they wandered down through Massachusetts and Connecticut and ended up at in Rhode Island, and they founded Providence.
Mm-hmm.
And then they crossed into Long Island.
Mhm.
And that was, their name was Smith, and they founded Smithtown,
Oh, okay.
Long Island.
And
And
tell the story of Bull Smith.
Oh, yes. Well, my ancestor had a son that had worked with Cromwell in the cavalry. He was a great horseman. And he came over later. And so he met his father there on Long Island, and he made friends with the Indians. And he said he was a wonderful horseman. And the Indians said they would give him enough land to as much land as he could encircle on the back of a bull. And he took the bet, and he went around what is now Smithtown.
Go ahead.
And so my family lived in Smithtown for a long time, but until they got to be too many of them, and then they began
They
to
parceled
go.
out the land.
What?
They parceled out the land.
Yes, they parceled out the land and they used it all up, and so they decided to go west. And each generation went further west and further west and further west until they got to Seattle.
Till they ended up in Hawaii.
Oh, they didn't
By the
make
way.
it, they didn't, but they made it to Alaska.
How important is having a sense of humor?
How important?
Yeah,
Everything.
Everything. That's it. If you can't laugh and you laugh at yourself and things
Oh,
around
my,
you.
you're stuck if you can't do that.
And the older you get, the more you need a
Yes.
sense of
The more you need it, yeah, because
Yes.
things aren't.
Things aren't so
They
funny.
don't, they're not quite the humorous.
Well, I think the young take themselves much more seriously, though.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
They,
Well,
they think they're goners if something happens.
Yeah, that's. What historical event of all the ones we talked about? What was the most left the most lasting impression on you?
Well, I guess the time that Roosevelt said, talked over the radio and announced that we were at war.
Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what was your family gathered around the radio?
Yes, they were. All gathered around the radio out on a little porch. I remember that. Remember just where I was sitting and everything.
What were the expressions? You remember the expressions? Let's see. You were
Oh my.
almost 40 then. So you had kids by then?
Oh yes.
Uh-huh.
No,
No, not
Jimmy
yet,
was born
'cause-
in 1945.
Okay. Waited till after the war to have kids.
Yes. Oh yes. So this was, when was the war? 1942, wasn't it?
41 December, so 42
Yes,
when we really
that's
got.
it. I was married.
Yeah.
I know that.
Hmm.
But we happened to be together, and we didn't really know it was going to happen.
You were, yeah. A lot of people say, "Oh, yeah, I saw that one coming." Roosevelt,
No.
you know, this and that. But,
I don't think so.
yeah. Did you? You knew some people that went over there that had to fight because practically everybody had
Yes,
to
her
had to
brother
fight.
did.
Yes, my brother did.
Mm-hmm.
My brother fought in those Pacific Islands.
Pacific.
He ended up in, where did there was one place where he was given the job of going out on the battlefield after the battle was over and picking up all the dog tags. That
Mm-hmm.
was a terrible job.
Ugh.
And he was never the same after that. And he wouldn't talk about it.
And that was in the Pacific.
Awful.
Okay.
And the funny part of it was when he was drafted, he was drafted to go to France to teach and be in that war. But the army sent him to the east.
Which most of the army guys were in Europe,
Yes.
right? And
Yes,
the
that's
Navy and the
right.
Marines took
But
care of the
he
Pacific,
was
right?
sent in Europe, and he proceeded. He went all the way, I think, to Japan.
Do you have a bucket list?
A bucket
A
list.
bucket list is like,
A list of things you want to do.
Oh, have I got a bucket list? No.
okay, so you've pretty much covered it all.
I really
She's
am.
had a chance.
Let me-
She's done a lot of. I mean, she learned how to video.
It's not
I've
easy.
forgotten.
But she was able to do editing and videoing, and
Great.
and she learns things still, but she won't get involved with the computer.
Yeah,
No.
yeah. I mean, that's a whole can of worms there
Yeah.
you're talking about. Do you believe in moderation?
Yes.
Okay.
That's really been her life, is to be,
That,
Yeah.
you know,
some
a little
of the
bit of this and a little bit of that. Her siblings, no. All of them are gone.
My siblings were very adventurous, but they're all gone now.
Yeah. Is that tough? When you think of it, a lot of people, the older you get, the more people you lose.
Yes, it's terrible.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Friends and
I
relatives.
really don't know anybody that's of my generation.
Mm-hmm.
But the closest is your brother's wife,
Yes.
and they call back and forth.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
John Tyler.
Okay.
Okay. Well, actually, there's nothing really. There was.
No, he was.
John Tyler is my
he was
father's.
known as
Right.
the president with the most children.
Yeah, he still has two grandchildren. According to Jeopardy,
Yeah.
he still has two grandchildren
That are living.
that are alive because he
Well,
had a child.
You want to look at that chair? That chair was in the White House when he was president.
Oh wow, I gotta get a shot of
Those
that.
two chairs.
The two chairs. Okay.
There
How
was the
about
man's chair and the women's chair, and the
Wow.
man's chair is
Okay.
more complicated.
I'll go ahead and insert those later. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the other relative that my father had was William Clark of the Lewis.
Oh,
and
that's
Clark
right. I knew there was somebody. William
Yeah.
Clark, who,
Yes.
as far as history goes, is one of the real pillars.
Yeah.
Real interesting.
He
Yeah.
was the one, the human one that put things together, but the other fella was the planner.
Yeah.
And he was the contact with
Yes.
Jefferson.
But he was the one, and Tyler ended up being appointed the governor of that whole Louisiana.
That's right. Yeah. Well, and did they know each other?
Oh yes.
I mean, were they related? I
No.
guess. Okay.
They were.
But they knew each other.
They
So you're.
both knew Jefferson. Jefferson
Wow.
was their big friend.
Wait,
Well,
so
I
if I
think
shake your hand again, I shook the hand and shook the hand and shook of Thomas Jefferson? Wow, wait a minute, I gotta get in on this. Okay, I shook the hand, they shook the hand, they shook the hand, they shook the hand of Thomas Jefferson, and shook the hand of Abraham Lincoln and John Tyler and Meriwether Lewis. No, was it Lewis?
No,
Or was it
William
Clark? Clark? Okay.
William Clark.
Without all that is my husband.
No, that's all the husband.
But still,
And
you
then
shook
the
your
other
husband's
one-
hand more than once.
Yes, I did.
The third one that we have claim to fame is the person who started the Kentucky Derby.
Yes.
Okay, did you watch it last week?
Yeah,
No,
no,
we
we
missed
missed
it.
it. It was the first one we've ever missed.
Yes.
Oh, we were
First
so
one
mad.
I've seen.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
really?
Well, not real. That's an exaggeration, but it was the first one I was anticipating.
Oh, okay.
What I want to get on the tape right now is the names were Mary Martin.
Mary Martin, and his name, let me look up his name. His name was Colonel Meriwether Lewis Clark. Meriwether Lewis Clark Jr.
He
Okay.
was named. He was named for
William
Meriwether.
Clark.
Yeah, how
Mer-
about-
William
Meriwether
Clark's
Clark,
son.
is not related. He was named for him because Clark liked.
He was
Okay.
very
Worked
fond
with
of Meriwether Lewis, and evidently Meriwether Lewis committed suicide. He was waiting for Clark to come to see him, and
Oh,
he
is that-
committed suicide by the
yeah.
time Clark got
I
there.
get it. Okay.
But anyway, Clark's son was named after Meriwether Lewis, so he was Meriwether Lewis Clark. And this person who started the Derby was named Meriwether Lewis Clark Jr. So he
Oh.
was the son of Meriwether Lewis Clark.
Wow.
So they
And-
were very close.
And you say this is the guy that started the Kentucky Derby?
And this
Yes.
is the guy that started the Meriwether Lewis Clark Jr. was the one that
Junior
started.
is the one that started
Yeah.
the Kentucky Derby.
Yes.
And his wife's name was Mary Martin.
Right.
And of course, we all know that let's see, she has a famous son. Never mind. We won't get into all these name things. But okay, I'll get a shot of your
And her name was Mary Martin Anderson.
Mary
actually.
Martin Anderson.
Yeah,
Okay.
Mary Martin Anderson.
All right.
She was the mother of my grandfather, who was the
Okay.
father of my father.
Boy,
Now,
that,
listen, Jenny is related, but I'm not because
Yeah.
that's
That was
Toby's.
husband.
My
yeah. Your husband's name was Toby?
Yes, Toby
Toby
Tyler.
Tyler.
Toby Tyler.
No, his name.
Wow.
Well,
You
that
got
was
some
his-
cool names in
that
your
was
family.
His nickname. His name was Orville Anderson.
Orville,
And
well.
he couldn't stand it.
Was it named after the Wright brother? or the wrong, well,
The
never
Wright
mind.
brothers were named after him.
Yeah. That's